You have to sign. What's up? It's delayed. Oh, that's right. Lights.
Hey, this is Rick from Lost and Found. I've got a couple volunteers with me here. Everybody's always asking what it's like to do outreach and what our kids are having to live in. So we're at an abandoned building. We're going to take you in. We're not going to show you any kids, but we're going to show you some of the rooms that we've found.
It's dark. There's must and mold everywhere. We have to use the light from our phones to see 2 feet in front of us. We're trying to find out what conditions these kids live in, but we're also trying to watch out in case someone jumps at us from the shadows. I think that the most unsettling thing beyond the trash and the drugs was the absence of hope. There are several rooms in the buildings that are being used as bathrooms. I actually walked into the room video recording before I realized I was standing in the middle of a room that was covered in human feces. When you look around the room at all the artifacts of the person who's living there, it really starts to change your preconceived notions of who a homeless person actually is. We've surrounded ourselves with all these shallow measures of wealth, and because of that, the people who need us most are able to blend in to the point of invisibility.
Little bird has shown me that you can't run away from love. Open wide my feelings and tear me down until I break. Yes, show me what the real is. Guaranteed to see my face.
What do you think that these people need that are living here?
They need not to live in this, plain and simple. We need a better system. We need to be able to help these people more. And you'll see what's going on the inside.
So, it's been a little over a year. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rick Westbrook, the Executive Director of Lost and Found. I'd like to introduce at this time my Board of Directors, Paul Swicord, our Chief Financial Officer, Art Izzard, our Street Outreach, Jason Fasi, our Corporate Secretary, Alan Peebles, our Director of Housing. It's been a long year. I would love to put a video up here of happy, feel good, but we've got a problem in Atlanta. We're going to talk a little bit about it tonight and tell you what we've discovered over the past year, where we plan to go, and the hurdles that we're running up against. We do have some special people here tonight that I would like to introduce, that some successful partnerships that we've started with. Josh, where are you? Josh, if you could tell us about Covenant House and Stand Up. I'm sorry to lose my voice.
You want to talk about both of them? Or did you want me to stand up and talk about Covenant House? All right, so I'm Joshua Gray. I'm the Crisis Shelter Coordinator for Covenant House, Georgia. We're the only emergency shelter program in Atlanta for youth ages 12 to 21 specifically. We've had a great year of partnership with Lost and Found. This past year at Covenant House, we served almost 500 youth. And probably 25% of those youth were LGBT youth. So we spent a lot of good time together trying to transition kids to Lost and Found if it was going to be a better fit, or if a kid wasn't Lost and Found and needed something different, transition them with us. We have a program that's a 30-day program. It includes focusing on education, employment, and housing. We offer GED classes on site, and here in the next 60 to 90 days, we're going to be moving into a brand new facility where within 3 years we'll be able to have 60 crisis beds. Currently I have 15. So we're expanding greatly, and we're thankful for the partnership with Lost and Found. We want to see them come along with us and expand more, and we'll be right there alongside of you, continue to do this great work that's much needed in this community.
Thank you. And I can tell you, you know, Josh always answers our calls. That we don't get that with every agency that we deal with, you know, and he's there for advice. So another partner that we have, did Connie's person show?
Yeah.
Yes.
Introduce you. I'm sorry.
Hi. Sorry I didn't have a chance to introduce myself to you earlier. My name is Rebecca Roebuck. I'm here on behalf of our Executive Director, Connie Buchanan, from Community Advanced Practice Nurses. We're a small organization that provides free of charge health care for the homeless and medically underserved here in Atlanta. So we see the youth that are at Lost and Found at Covenant House trying to get kids physicals so they can get in the shelters, TB tests and STD screenings and all those things that everybody needs just for their general health. And also immunizations for school. A lot of these kids have been overlooked, and simple stuff like that that we might take for granted. So our mission is just to strengthen the lives of those that are medically underserved, and it's an honor to be able to provide service to these youth that really deserve the best that we can offer.
Kids love Connie, I can tell you that, and her organization. And then we have Brian Sharp and from the APD liaison. So can you introduce yourselves, please?
Brian Sharp, LGBT liaison, and
Kristen Knight, LGBT liaison.
Oh, welcome.
Brian's been helpful with a couple of legal issues even before Lost and Found, what became Lost and Found. And he's been a resource that we can call on and respond as necessary. So,
And he's been watching over my butt when I've been out on the streets. It's a lot of fun to clown around with. Did we have anybody show up from the mayor's office?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
When I reached out to Rich yesterday, he was pretty sure somebody was going to be here.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, what you saw on the screen is what's called a squat, okay? We'll cover different scenarios as we go through of what our, I keep calling them kids, what our youth have to deal with. At Lost and Found, we deal with youth 18 to 25. We can deal with kids under that age for 72 hours before we have to report them. And we have had success with some agencies, if they're younger than that, in placing them there. But it's not Lost and Found.
there's a lot more red tape to be able to deal with somebody under 18.
Yeah.
And we're not financially stable enough to tackle that level yet. It is something we're open to,
Absolutely.
but we're doing what we can do, and we're doing it now.
Other scenarios that you're going to find is there's so many different types of homelessness. We have couch surfing, which is the best scenario that we can possibly hope for if a kid's been kicked out. We have the squad. We have camp outs, which we're going to be bringing a video to you soon. And while those are not happy-go-lucky things, I've asked each one of the board members, except for myself, because Alan and I deal with basically all the kids, and we all touch some part of their paperwork or dealing with the kids. But we picked out some stories that of the kids that we have dealt with over the past year, and we've helped over 100 kids so far, which is phenomenal. Just Alan, I'd like you to tell our first success story with Kay.
Okay. Kay came to us in our very first group, and I believe she was still in the hotel. She came to us in the hotel, didn't she? So she started off with us very, very easy, very, very early in the situation. And she was 18 years old when she arrived. By the time she graduated, she just turned 19. She landed a fantastic job that fit her personality with a reasonable period of time, saved up her money for an apartment, got a great apartment. We went to Atlanta Furniture Bank and got her set up, and she's doing really good. Now she's gone on her own. This was not part of the initial plan to go to college. She's already started college, and she's saving up for her first house, all in 1 year. So that's a great thing.
You tell us about Mike.
Gotcha. This one's a little unique. He was referred to us by a business partnership that we've got with a couple of businesses in town. Heard from him from 2 different businesses at the same time while he was already on the street looking for work. His parents had recently died, and parents had already died. He was living in his grandfather's house. The grandparents had died, and now that the other family members were ready to settle the state, and so they wanted to put him out on the street once they turned 18 and were no longer getting Social Security checks. So we were able to set him up and bring him into our home and get him stabilized. One of the referral businesses immediately hired him. Gave him some work exposure that he'd never had and stuff like that, and got him working. We got him into Georgia State.
He finished high school.
He finished high school while he was still with us, yeah. So.
And he continues to thrive. We keep up with our kids as much as possible. They're not all success stories. We're very transparent. We will tell you anything you want to know. We won't tell you kids' names. So in the vein of that, can you tell us about T?
No, he's T.
Oh, sorry, T.
T's a 22-year-old male who is a perfect example of the kind of youth that we would really like to be able to serve better, and tends to fall through the cracks across Atlanta in most of the agencies here in town. T had a drug addiction, as you might expect with some gay males here in town, crack and stuff like that. We took T in, we tried to get him stabilized. Rick delivered him up to a treatment facility up north of town, up Marietta, I believe it was. And before Rick was even able to get back into town on the expressway, got a call saying, we've kicked T out. Can you come pick him back up? So he's been in contact with us. Most recently he had gone back home to Rome, asked us to send him his paperwork. We collect IDs and birth certificates on all the kids that we can, and said, hey, could you send that stuff up to me? I think I've got myself stabilized with some friends of the family. I'm really going to try to improve my life now. So we photocopied what we had, stuck it in the mail, and a couple weeks later the letter came back to us, returned to sender. Called the last number we had from him, and they said, sorry, he didn't last. He's disappeared on us. So, he's the kind of kid that we'd love to have the ability to serve on the street in something like a drop-in facility or something, which we think there's a desperate need for, and we'll talk about that later. So he's somebody we would love to have success with, but we haven't yet been able to get our hooks around exactly how we do that.
And last but not least, if you could tell us about 3K.
Okay. One of the issues that LGBT people encounter when they go to shelters is if they're in a relationship and they have a child, that the families get broken up. So the 3Ks were a black lesbian couple with a child, biologically belonging, a child of one of the mothers. And anytime that they were going to shelters, they were going to be split up, and the child would stay with just one of the parents. And that was assuming that they could even find space. And at the time that they called us, they had run out of money staying at an extended stay hotel and were actually sleeping in the lobby of the men's shelter because all the other shelters were full. And the way that they got to where they were from out of state. They'd saved up a bunch of money. They wanted to make it here in Atlanta. They both had jobs, one part-time, one full-time. But they were the victims of a Craigslist fraud scam where they were rented a house that the person who rented it to them took their deposit, took their first and last month's rent, and didn't have the right to rent the house out, and they were evicted relatively swiftly, having lost all of their money and having no way to get it back. And they had been sort of surviving week to week in an extended stay hotel until the one who had been working part-time lost her job. So we, as far as we know, are the only place in town that those families can go with their kids and keep their kids with them and stay together as a family and get served as a family. And they are certainly a success story. When they came in, the one had a full-time job, ended up switching to a better full-time job, and was attempting to save as much money as possible. And then the other parent found a work-at-home job, which was fantastic, so that she could stay with the child and help raise the child at home while working. They saved up some money and they moved out. They ended up relocating back to where they came from, saying, Atlanta's really not working out for us, but they're doing great where they are back home. So,
And while they were with us, they excelled.
And getting the resources with us
Yeah.
also helped them discover that their child actually had a learning disability and needed to have more attention and more help. And being on the streets and being in an extended stay hotel, it's very difficult to socialize a child and very difficult to make sure that the child has other children to play with, other people to talk to, and just the kind of progress the child was making when it was living in the house, being able to talk to more people. The difference between what you could understand coming out of the child's mouth versus on the first day was very different from the kind of speech that the child was giving on the day that they moved out. So, we felt really good about watching that happen as well. So, Rick mentioned there's a lot of different kinds of homeless people, and one of the things that I think we've all learned as a part of this is that really the kinds of preconceived notions you have about homeless people just get thrown out the door when you actually deal with the problem and face it head on and take a good look at it. So.
And I wish I could tell you that was the only lesbian couple with the child that we had. We had 5 in the last year. There's a tremendous need out there. We take the youths, black, white, gay, bi, trans. We serve a large portion of the trans community that's homeless. We could open a whole house and take care of that. But we even took a pansexual. I had to Google that one. When I was growing up, it was called a bisexual, but we don't ask questions. We don't separate them. We make them live together. It's not always in harmony. But that's something they got to learn as they're going out into the world, is how to get along with people. And it's been a long year, but a good year. There's been a lot of tears, but a lot of happy tears too. So, so we're going to go ahead and move into, with Art and Jason, national stats versus Atlanta stats.
So I guess I'll walk to the front and hope this clicker works. Kind of simultaneously running the tech makes this a little bit difficult. I guess I'll stand off to the side. One reason I really like that we were hoping to open this meeting with some of the personal stories is that when you start looking at people as numbers, things get really depersonalized. And we are going to go through a bunch of numbers right now, and these are really significant because, as far as I know, since the closure of Rainbow House, nobody in Atlanta has been tracking what specifically the LGBT youth homeless problem looks like. And we're also going to look at some national stats just to see how that compares and also to fill in for some of the areas where we don't have information. I'm not a statistician. We have at least 1 or 2 volunteers who are pretty good with statistics, but these are pretty simple. There's a lot of room for growth here, and we're going to need to do more growth in our statistics. But this is what we have so far. So as far as the clients' ages that we serve, we were actually kind of surprised to find out it's pretty equally distributed amongst the age range that we serve, with a little bit heavier push right towards the the mid-20s. You start seeing a little bit more of an uptick. I don't know. How they find us, the vast majority of them have been finding us online. This also sort of surprised me when I first learned about this problem. How many homeless youth have cell phones? How many of them maintain internet access and find their way to have these sorts of resources that I think are probably essential to them being able to navigate in that sort of lifestyle. The second one we have are from other organizations. So, Josh mentioned that there have been times where he's referred us to clients, and we've also referred clients back to him. But other organizations like Evolution Project, other shelters that had trans people that they couldn't take care of, didn't know what to do with. United Way, just to name the DeKalb workforce. It's been coming since we've been getting on some of these lists about resources in the community. Where we've been getting these referrals from has been very varied. Family and friends, street outreach. These were a lot of the earlier clients that we had. Art was finding through Stand Up for Kids, doing some of their street walks and getting in touch with them off the street. Paul mentioned businesses. There have been several businesses that have noticed or have figured out when youth coming in their doors or hanging around when they've sort of had the conversation with them and found out that they're homeless. And early on when we were starting this organization, we actually didn't have a complete intake form. So a lot of our earliest clients, we just unfortunately don't have this kind of data for. By gender, this was also really interesting to me. The kinds of genders that you typically find in homeless shelters are generally more heavily skewed towards females, whereas with us we're about half male. A good 14% of so that's, if we've had over 100, about 14, 15 of our clients have been trans. That's including both male to female, it's male, and other was that 1%, was that one transsexual.
Can you go back just 1 second?
Sure.
I want to call out to you, notice that we are tracking our trans clients, and then as you go forward and look at the national statistics here, we've sort of lucked out in that prior to a month or two ago, we were working off national statistics that were several years old. The last study we could find that was really a good study that was done of LGBT homeless youth was done in 2008, 2009. A study just came out that was co-sponsored by Cindy Lauper's True Colors Fund out of New York and the Williams Institute at UCLA that was run from October to March of this year. So October last year to March of this year. So these national statistics are really up to date. But notice, even here, they're not breaking out their trans clients. And that's something sort of unique in the way we operate. We're very clear about, we consider trans to be their own group. We know they've got some serious access issues here in town, so we like to keep track of them. Anyway, this is the national statistics from the Williams Institute study. 53% female, 46% male.
So tracking orientation, I actually had some data scrubbing issues here because I was thinking to myself, well, gay and lesbian in this chart sort of write the gender onto the orientation, which I feel most of the time should be treated separately. But just to give a good idea to, I think, the lesbian community to have an idea of who's identifying as a lesbian who we're serving. Straight, you notice, is also 14%. That's because the majority of trans clients that come to us, although they have, have their own gender identity situation going on, the vast majority of them after they transition identify as straight because they like the opposite gender from what they transition to.
Because what?
They are attracted to the opposite gender of what they transition to. So if you're a male to female transsexual and you like men, you see yourself as a female that likes men, so you see yourself as a straight female. And we don't try to further make any sort of distinction or make them feel otherwise, because I feel it's our place to be writing our conceptions into them. Sorry, I said we do that. We specifically track it as straight because even though they identify as trans by gender, we want to make sure that they are self-identifying in our data.
The other thing I'd call out, that we just sort of touched on a few minutes ago. Rick talked about it very briefly. But early on, we made a decision that for us, there's no litmus test for being gay. You know, we've had a lot of people ask us, do you only help LGBT kids? No, we'll take a straight kid. Obviously, the youth would need to understand and be comfortable with coming into an environment where they're going to be surrounded 24/7 with, you know, LGBT folk. But we do serve and assist straight youth as well.
Yeah, I'll mention that of this 14% that's listed here, I know at least 2 clients that we served who were, you know, not trans and who were straight, who were referred to our program and right on home. And we have had trans people who, even after they've transitioned genders, felt attracted to the same gender that they transitioned to and then identified as homosexual, some of one kind or the other. So it's a very complicated, gender sexual minorities are very complicated classifications to make.
So this is a national statistic, again, from the Williams Institute study of where these youth are being served at nationally. And the reason why this is up here is because we wanted to call out, and you're going to hear us talk a lot more, and I don't know why that 0% is up there, but about how these kids come into programs nationally. So these are 3 different varieties of programs, and this study was done, I'm going to get the number wrong, I'm going to say roughly 350 different programs across the country that are serving LGBT youth. Of those programs that run drop-in centers, 57% of the kids coming in were not LGBT, 43% were. Of the programs that ran street outreach, 30% LGBT, 70% not, and the same statistics for the programs that ran housing. What's important to take away from this is to understand that in society as a whole, you know, the general statistic that's thrown around is LGBT folk, us, are roughly 5 to 10% of the society as a whole. For homeless youth, it's massively overrepresented. So there's a lot more homeless youth represented in the homeless population than there are in society as a whole, if that made sense.
I wanted to point out, on sort of on the same theme as overrepresentation, that of the clients that we've had come in, classifying them, again, roughly by race, by their own self-identity, 64% of the clients coming in the door are self-identify as black. 27% is white, 8% is multiracial, the majority of those being either a mix of black and white or a mix of black and Latino, and only 1% Latino. Atlanta's demographics I put here, this I just took off of the Wikipedia data, which is U.S. Census data, being 55% black, 37% white, 5% Latino, 3% Asian Pacific Islander. So something interesting to me is that we have a relatively large population of Latinos not being represented in our client base, and that's something we'll talk about a little bit later about. We need to figure out if that's because we are not outreaching to them properly in the language, if there really is a problem there, or what. We really need to delve into that. And also the fact that we have not had a single Asian Pacific Islander client. I don't have any explanation to that, but I'm really curious to find out if there's more that we could be doing there, how we could reach out to them. So that's something we're going to be doing next year. How do they come to us before, where are they before they get to us, this data here? As I said before, something really surprising to me is that my conceived notion of a homeless person before being in this organization was just somebody who was either living in their car or living on the street. And as you can see here, there's a lot of other situations that we would classify as somebody who's not homeless, not having a permanent housing situation where they can be evicted at any given time. So 30% from shelters. So when we get referrals from other shelters, sometimes it's directly from other shelters, and sometimes it's from LGBT clients who are in shelters and are not comfortable there. There are religious shelters locally that will help them, but will proselytize to them and tell them that they're wrong for being gay, and tell them not to be gay, and they have absolutely no idea what to do with trans people. So they can either be leaving a shelter of their own accord because they're uncomfortable. They can also be aging out of that shelter's program. Some of these shelters are 30 days. Some of them are, 1 day overnight. So if time is up, it could be a referral. Streets are people, actually living on the streets, whether that's a squat like you saw in the video, whether that's a camp out, whether that's, under an eave. Again, earlier on in the program, we just didn't have this information on our forms, and unfortunately, it's just a gap in our data that hopefully will get smaller and smaller as time goes on. Couch surfing. So Rick had mentioned, well, if you get kicked out by your parents, at least hopefully you have a friend to stay with. But the thing is, if your landlord finds out you've got somebody living on your couch and they're not paying rent and they agree to it, you can get kicked out. If your friend's family finds out, you can get kicked out. If your friend gets evicted, which has been the case for several clients who come in, you could be on the streets again. Living in their car, and then I mentioned the extended stay hotel with the lesbian couple with the child, and we've had a couple of situations like that. And then one person who was just in the process of eviction, actually going through the legal process, and we had actually advised them, like, stay in there as long as you possibly can. And we didn't really want to classify, didn't really know how to classify that any other way. Something else we've noticed, the youth that come into this program, more often than not, have a history well, I shouldn't say more often than not. A good proportion of them have a history in the foster care program. That's not to say that they are aging out of foster care when they come to us, but this says to the outcomes of how that system works. It also gives clues as to what their family life might have been like as a child, because we asked them also what age that they were in foster care, and it ranges everything from when they were an infant all the way to when they were 18, for any number of years. The number one reason why we get clients is because families kick them out. Absolute. Number one reason is that they either come out to their parents, they're outed to their parents suspect and happen to be right, and they kick them out. A lot of them, whether or not that's true, maybe go on, get jobs, whatever, they lose their job, they're in our program. A good portion of them run away because of abuse issues, that they were sexually or physically or emotionally abused at home, I believe. A small portion of smaller portions of them for drugs. One for the housing fraud I mentioned. We mentioned Ann, who had no family really to speak of after his parents and his grandparents died, no direct family to take care of him. And then one whose support for their student finances from their parents was dropped out. So that was something I thought really could be its own category. Maybe should be lumped right back in with family rejection. But, we've only had a very small portion of clients who've aged out of foster care. Chris Kids, a local organization that I think almost everybody here is familiar with, really does specialize in taking kids that are aging out of the foster care program and bringing them into their program. And the fact that we have all of these clients with previous histories of foster care that aren't immediately leaving foster care and becoming homeless, we said, maybe that's getting picked up by that.
So this is a national statistic compared to what you just saw locally. These are nationally the top 5 reasons why LGBT youth become homeless. There's a slight difference between the top 2. One is running away because the family rejected them. That's our number 1 reason too. Okay, family rejects them, so they run away. Well, that's run away. Forced out is the second one. Okay, so we kind of combine those top 2 into that single statistic that was almost 50%.
Right. And if you add these up, you'll notice they go to way over 100, so they tend to classify them into more than one.
Then their next one down, the third reason why folks become homeless nationally, LGBT folks, is abuse at home. That can be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. Aged out of foster care, the number 4 reason, and then as you can read, their financial or emotional neglect from family. That would be like what some of our smaller percentages. The youth who lost his family didn't have any financial support, the stuff like that, the school support and things.
To get an idea of where they are, 42% of them that come to us don't have their Georgia ID card. I think, with the election and voting and ID requirements, I think this is all fresh on everybody's mind, how important it is that you have these documents in order to function in society. And a lot of these are necessary in order for them to get services from the government. So 31% don't have their birth certificate, and 27% don't have their social security card. I really don't know why, and I really should start asking the clients, how is it that you have a social security card but not your ID, or why is it that is the document that they tend to hold on to the most? I'm not exactly sure. But I mean, we often when they first come in the door, this is what we have to do in order to get them plugged in elsewhere. We have to start this process, which can take weeks, just to get their IDs. And of course, you get these catch-22 situations where if you don't have one, you can't get the other, which means you can't get the third. So it's often like chasing your tail. By education level, so a good quarter of the clients that come in have not graduated high school. So these family problems that they've been having, the rejection they're facing, is ultimately happening when they're younger. However, a good portion of them have graduated high school or gotten their GED, and even another portion have gone to college. I will mention for-profit colleges is going to be a developing issue with some of these youth that are financially at risk and perhaps stable on their own but don't have family support. Because most of them that have reported that they have had some college have had to stop because the colleges were too expensive because they were going to these for-profit colleges that charge out their nose. And they don't have the kind of mentoring in their lives where they could be told that there are other college options for them that would be cheaper, less expensive, and as good if not better. Not everybody who comes in the door doesn't have a job. A lot of them have part-time jobs. But I think something that has been ignored from inflation statistics for the United States since inflation statistics have been tracked is the cost of housing. That's never been in that consumer price index. The cost of housing has actually gone up by thousands of % over time, and part-time jobs just don't cut it in order to support yourself. So a couple of them have had full-time jobs, especially with the couples. If you have a partner you're supporting plus a child you're supporting, it can be very difficult even with a full-time job to support the family. I added this note here on bank accounts that not the vast majority, but a good majority of them don't come in with bank accounts, just to give you an idea of how much kind of parenting or mentoring has gone into this youth before they've ended up at age 18. Back, growing up in my suburb in California, that was unheard of. So that's part of our goal here is not just to get them a job, get them to save money and move out, but we end up having to give them budgeting talks, personal finance 101, go to a bank with them to open an account so that they have some sort of idea of how they can keep going and stay on their own 2 feet over time. We have a lot more physical or sexual abuse than I wish would show up on these forms, of course, but the forms that we have taken data as soon as we are meeting this person for the first time, and a lot of them leave that blank. So a good 50% of the clients that we've had these intake forms on have not indicated whether or not they were victims of physical or sexual abuse, probably because we haven't built that trust with them yet. But it's certainly an issue and an issue for these youth. One thing we wanted to do, and not just give you statistics about what it looks like, but what we're doing about it. And when people leave our program, this is what happens. A good chunk of them leave and get their own place. Or they get a place with a friend, or they get a place even with other youth in the program. And their own housing here means moving on and being able to pay for their own living situation. The next one down is rules violations. Although we feel, we know that we have some of the most flexible rules, if not the most flexible rules of any homeless program in this city. These are adults with personal lives, social lives, and they don't always follow the rules. They don't always come home on time. They don't want to come home. They don't want to do things because they feel like they should be independent. And a good portion of them just continue to break the rules and end up having to leave. Drugs or alcohol, thankfully, have not been a huge issue for us. They are an issue. We do deal with it, but thankfully it has not been a major issue for why people end up leaving the program. A good portion of them get reunited with their families. What ends up happening is their family rejects them, kick them out. They end up with us, and a month later, they get back in touch with the family gets back in touch with them, and they say, look, this isn't working, I'm having a hard time, and the family may have had a change of heart, or maybe they're more flexible, maybe there's a different family member, an aunt or a grandmother who can help them out. And they end up reunited with their family. We don't always feel that's the most positive thing for them, because we always worry, well, if the parents change their mind in a month, what's going to stop them from changing back? But thankfully, maybe Alan can talk more about it later, but I don't know of too many situations that we've encountered where the people have been taken back and then kicked out again. I know of at least one lesbian couple that happened to. Behavioral issues, I didn't count that under rules violations again. I'm not a statistician, even though maybe it should belong there, but that's when we've had very few instances where people have gotten into verbal or physical altercations that ended up making them have to leave the program, and some various other reasons. Qualifying this is actually one of the biggest challenges for us. If you look at this, you can say, well, getting in your own house, getting back in with your parents, those are all positive outcomes, right? But again, we don't always know that. We're instituting a follow-up system where we're going to be getting back in touch with them and figuring out where they are, because we've even had some of these people who've left for rules violations get back in touch with us, either through Facebook or email or Alan, and say, look, I know I screwed up, but I just want to let you know that it was a really good experience for me, and I'm in a better place now, and I really just wanted to come back and thank you guys, even though some of these people did not leave on good terms. So that's been a good thing for us. Negative exits, that is rule violations, behavioral issues, and of course drugs and alcohol. And I think 58% is not a bad place to be for 5 people who never done this before. Well, except for maybe ours. But for those of us who haven't been doing this professionally, I think that's a pretty good rate. Of course, we're going to work as hard as we possibly can to make that 100%, because that's where we need it to be. Because when I heard that we actually had a former client who was back in that squad, I mean, that was not a good night for any of us. So with that, I'm going to go back and unpack and leave this down. Thank you.
Again, I'm Alan. I'm the house manager and live on the premises. I will go over the section of who's serving our clients. You are. You've empowered us to have Lost and Found, and as a result of that, you've helped us build a fantastic agency overnight. There is not a segment of the gay community that does not come around us. Every different type of people group, sports, the whole 9 yards, all of you have come around us, and we personally appreciate it. And so as a result of that, we're able to have a 6-bedroom house, 4 bathrooms, with 2 laundry rooms, right on the bus system and within walking distance of the train system. So it's been a very perfect fit from day one. But the other people that are trying to help, and some of them are doing the best they can, but not necessarily able to do it. Some of the religious facilities here in town, they go to and turn them away, or try to press their religious values on, as you all probably experienced at some point in your life, on them, and that just doesn't work so well. Groups like Union Mission, that type of thing. Gateway is one of the other places where we've gotten people away from. But then there are times when we have to send people there just so we can get out of the cold. That's a huge facility, and it's a difficult place to be, particularly as a gay person, but even worse as a transgendered person. There is no worse person to have to be homeless, in my book, than a transgendered person, because no one knows where to place them. If I refer somebody, and this makes me ashamed having grown up in the mental health system, if I try to refer you as a transgendered person to alcohol and drug treatment facilities or mental health facilities, they who are supposed to have already come up in age to where we're at, particularly here in Atlanta, they have no housing. They have no room. And so with one of our former clients, she went to the head of the agency and addressed it because she'd already been in and she needed to go back. There's also a lot of the successful partners. We've already talked about Covenant House, which we've had a fantastic relationship with. Community Advanced Practice of Nurses, who also stepped and said something to help our kids significantly with, they've been ill and that type of thing. Stand Up for Kids is a program that a lot of our kids like to, which is a drop-in center, a lot of our kids like to go to and spend time with, and we've gotten referrals from them as well. Young People Matter, and Positive Impact has really been great for us as well. And between Positive Impact and the Community for Advanced Practice of Nurses, we've gotten a lot of HIV and STD tests done, and as a result of that, we were able to see a number of people who were HIV positive and reach out to the most recent partner who turned out to be positive as well. So we're making an even broader touch into our community and helping to slow down the spread of HIV and other STDs as well. And then some of the folks that have helped us as a house and a group has been our volunteers. We've had an army of volunteers over the past year that we're very appreciative of. We have 2 social workers who come in and volunteer their time in groups, one-on-one social working situation. And now we're beginning to get into internships from the colleges and that type of thing. So going from 0 to 120 overnight is all because of y'all and this committee. So we thank you for what you've done for us.
Real quick, just reiterate what Alan just said about the volunteers. Lost and Found is entirely a all volunteer-driven organization, and several of our volunteers are here tonight, but I just want to give them another round of applause because without our volunteers, we could.
And something about our volunteers too, we make them earn the shirt. They've got to go through orientation and get background checks before you see somebody wearing one of these shirts. So not only do they earn it, then they turn around and pay for it as well. I'm the treasurer, that's where I come.
That's what we're going to speak about next. It's our defense system. I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
We started up, you know, how the thing started is I had a homeless kid come into my business. Didn't even know it for several months, but he was living out of his car. So I decided to try and see what I could do and make happen. I contacted the usual agencies, nowhere. Saw a listing in David magazine that some drag queens were raising money for homeless kids. That's all I knew. I knew the drag Ruby Rad, from when Ruby worked at the Eagle and stuff. I'm a Leatherman. I hadn't been to a drag show in 10 years. Just not my thing. You know, I've been there, done that, did that when I was a little kid. Just not my thing. I've never been a little kid. So I show up there and meet this one. In face.
Full sister face.
And with Ruby Red's help, acting as midwife, this is where we are today.
Yeah.
I wish Ruby could be here tonight, but
She's got bingo.
yep. And of course, we're going to hear about that as well.
She actually came by the on the street thing and goes, so what the hell's going on? You're doing another Wednesday thing. You know, it was a humble beginning. We started, and I'll tell this part for you before we get into the community response was phenomenal that first night. We walked out of here with enough money that we could take care of kids just like we told you we would do. And we started off with the Stratford Inn. And it grew so fast that within a month we realized we needed the house. I remember sitting in the parking lot crying at Stratford because I thought, how are we going to raise $30,000? And that was just for the house. But we did. And I can tell you now with these numbers that Paul's going to tell you, we do it more economical than anybody else in town. And we're not in it for the money. We do it because it needs to be done. So Paul's going to go over the numbers with you, and then we'll break it down a little further for you there.
It's no secrets here. Our house manager gets a little bit of a stipend. That's the only person that's making money out of this. And we're talking about survival stipend. He's not making a living off of this. Everywhere else is all volunteer. And they're paying for their own shirts. Early on, we realized that, okay, the amount of money that we're paying for hotel rooms at a really good, decent rate from a friend of mine, we found out real soon that we could be renting a house. Even paying the utilities and everything else. And so that's the direction we're going to do. I just got handed a report with an update. So my charts that you'll see here in just a moment are old. But as of last month's closing, $72,000 is what's come out of the community to help keep this going and stuff. And we're needing right at $5,000 a month to do what we're currently doing. And as you can see, there's needs that we need to expand and do more. Go ahead and give me the slide for the next one. This is where that money comes from. About 8% comes from different businesses. Grants total for about 13%. Nonprofits, for example, the Atlanta Bucks, when they raise money and ship it over to us and stuff like that. But you can see a big chunk of that right there is individuals. People right here, y'all write checks and set up continuing donations online. And again, individuals at the events. So, I mean, those two really need to be grouped as, where it comes directly from the individuals and stuff. That's our lifeblood.
That's y'all.
And this is what we do with the money. 69% of that goes into direct services of housing. Another 16% of that goes in MARTA and transportation. And Cliff, I know your numbers were all in housing, and I figured out what we did with MARTA and separated it out, so half of the stuff. Legal and professional fees. We're not paying any lawyers, they're volunteering for us.
King and Spalding, love them.
But there are some other fees that we just have to pay. You've got to pay $850 for a 501c3. And that's where that money goes. Printing, office expenses, postage, a little bit that we put into our events and fundraising campaigns and stuff. That's what's happening. And roughly, again, $5,000 a month is where this is going out with. Any questions? Cool.
On the, my name's Lloyd Taylor. On the housing, how much of that is for food or other things? And before you answer that, I came late, and I'm sorry.
No problem.
How tied in are you with the task force for the homeless and needs group, and the furniture bank, food bank, and all those free sources to get resources or other things to help with food expenses?
Sure. First off, furniture bank, food bank, and stuff like that, they help individuals. They don't help nonprofit organizations. So we cannot get furniture for the house, but we are set up as a partner agency so that once one of our kids is ready for their apartment, and they have, we've set up and gotten the furniture through Furniture Bank for them. So we're a partner agency with that. Food pantries are the same way. They want to help individuals. They don't want to give it to the nonprofit. So we can't feed them in the house with that food.
We get toilet paper and all here from the food bank.
Okay. That was one or two of the food banks, so that don't general rule. However, United Way, we made a connection there about 3 months ago. They pull up with this giant truck, and Ann says, "I'm sending you something," and it's surprising. We don't know what we expect. Toilet paper and stuff, we're all covered. So it's not. United Way is better set up to handle some of that stuff, where the food bank, a lot of those are situated correctly for individuals. Rory threw this big Christmas party last year, and lots of people brought gift cards. And then Chip Hill. Yeah. We have paid for, how long have you still got any of those from Chip Hill?
I'm just now finishing out approximately $1,000 worth of Kroger and Publix cards, and he raised it
It was $1,900.
Was it 1900? Okay,
$1,900.
I'll hold on my number.
There's one pool party.
It was such a joke on the Kroger staff, my coming in there. $20 to get to paying down.
$10, $15.
But it makes a huge impact.
And that's not even in this budget, because those were gift cards and we didn't see it going through our checking account and didn't track it that way. Yeah.
I noticed you don't have any spending on there for like any sort of like mental health services or like counseling.
All volunteer.
All volunteer. How do you do case management? Is that done? Is someone like assigned to them and you don't pay them and does that?
Tell you what, let me hold that, more of the questions and answers for the end, if you don't mind. Great questions. Sounds better to respond to that stuff.
It's really simple. Let me break this down for you. $5,000, $60,000 a year. If you break that down, that includes food, shelter, utilities, sometimes clothing, because we've got some big boys and big girls and T90 little ones, you know, that do that. And certain jobs require certain things. It includes modern transportation. There's not many agencies that do that. You factor that all down, it cost us $28 per day to house a child, a kid.
Is that per kid or?
That's per kid. $28 per day. That's the best rate in the city.
We take that because we have 6 beds, and you divide that by the 6 beds per day.
And all 6 beds have been full every day since we've opened. So that's what we've been through this year. Here's what we're planning for 2013 based on what we've seen, the needs in the community. And I'm not ignoring y'all. I'm trying to keep us on track so that everybody can get their questions answered. So I keep hitting my phone.
We're almost there. So, like Rick said, this is where we've been in the last year. This is what you've allowed us to do so far. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we'd like to do in the next year or two. These are some of our goals. As I mentioned when I told you the story about T, the youth who had the drug addiction problem, and as I tried to highlight as we were looking at some of the national statistics, one of the best ways and one of the most glaring holes for servicing these kids here in Atlanta is an active drop-in center. We would very much like to find a space in Midtown, the old 4th Ward area, where we could open the doors, 9 to 5, noon to 8, something like that, and have a drop-in center where these youth, for whatever reason, whether it's a drug addiction or they're not ready to come in off the streets. Believe it or not, there are kids out there that are simply not ready to come in off the streets. Or they've got behavioral issues, or for whatever reason they can't stay in a housing program. We could still service them. We could still have a connection with them. We could still connect them to other services. We could still do referrals to Covenant House, to Community Advanced Practice Nurses, to all these other great agencies in town that they probably don't know about. So one of our big goals in the coming next year or two, hopefully sooner than that, is to get a drop-in center open, a real, true, honest-to-God, homeless youth drop-in center. You saw in the statistics also that, when we first opened through connections with agencies, Stand Up, Covenant House, stuff like that, we were bringing a lot of kids in through those programs. As we've grown, that's sort of fallen off. One of the things, and it's my responsibility as the outreach director, that we're going to really start focusing on in the coming months is an active outreach program, doing street outreach here in Midtown, in areas where we know our folks are at. So, getting out on the street, making sure businesses in the area have our cards. You may have seen some cards as you came in. Our goal is to get one of these cards in every youth's hand that needs it, so they know how to get a hold of us 24/7. Latino outreach, again, with the statistics. We've got a couple volunteers, or specifically a volunteer, who's now translating all the materials, these cards, the trifolds that you have, into Spanish for us. so that we can start to do some outreach in the Latina community. Because we really feel like that's a population that not only we've overlooked, but that a lot of shelters in town are overlooking. A fostering program. You may have heard Rick talk about this in the past, but we'd really like to have an exit mechanism out of our housing program that's longer term, where a kid that we know, that we've developed a relationship with, that's, Alan has, worked with them doing the case management stuff that you asked about. This kid's ready to move out of the house, because our housing program is really only a 30 to 90 day program in reality. We're not going to kick a kid out, but we do try to move them along. What we'd like to have is to be able to move them into a fostering program where we've vetted volunteers in the community that are willing to open a door, whether it's a spare bedroom or a basement apartment or something like that, to these kids, where we can say, this is a good kid, this is a stable kid, they're ready to move on with their lives, they've got employment, will you take them? Give them a year lease or something like that. And we can still keep an eye on them, have a connection with them, that they're living in the community.
Or even if it's to give them 3 months until, we would still monitor them on a weekly basis.
Right.
Give them 3 months to build up something so they can get an apartment. I mean, we do what we can in the 3 months, but to explain to a 22-year-old that you're not going to get a gated apartment on a part-time job at the airport, even though the airport pays really well. So we need to look at a roommate situation or something like that. None of us are super rich in here, but a lot of our community has a spare bedroom that they can live out. We're not talking about putting kids in there with problems. We're talking about we've got a lot of really good kids, and that's the next logical step. It's being done in other communities, and we're exploring the possibility here.
And on the other end of that, we mentioned that we get referrals from people who are under 18 who we can't serve for more than 72 hours before we have to report them to the Department of Family and Child Services. It would be nice to have actual state approved foster parents available in those situations, for people who need to continue to go to high school, who are just getting kicked out by their family, and try and get them back, back moving forward in the right direction before they end up, 22 with no ID and on the street and trying to find us.
We've got a youth that's contacting us on a regular basis that's living in another shelter right now that desperately wants to live with his people, right? But he's 17. We can't do anything for him right now. Okay.
And I've got to be honest with you, other agencies say it doesn't matter. Just throw the queer kids in with the straight kids. We've actually seen, and Covenant House does a great job in integrating them. There's a lot of shelters out there that don't. Art and I could take you to a shelter right now that has 4 beds for gay men with HIV reserved each night that are 25 and under, 24 and under. But the entire time they're there, they're preached to about you wouldn't have this problem if you changed to Christianity. I never want any of our kids to have to go through that or for a meal. So we have seen it. Kaylee, our success story, had been through every system in the city. And when she came to us, they actually said good luck, because she'll just work you and move on. When she came around, and this is not a prejudice thing, but she came around her people that understood her, everything about her, her quirks, she excelled. We see it time and time again.
Yeah. Some of the other things that we're actively working on getting better at and doing, and you'll hear more, when we come to this meeting a year from now, you'll be hearing more about these specific things. Going after grant money. We've always been upfront and honest with the community and said, we are not going to take any grant money that comes with strings attached. And we're not going to. But we do want to, we've gotten to a point, we've got a good volunteer base, we've got a good statistical base, that we're ready to start going after grant money that we can get, as long as it's not coming with strings that are going to hamper our program.
Let me mention those strings. What we've discovered is that there is a HUD program, HUD rule that requires that two unmarried people cannot share the same bedroom with a juvenile. So a lesbian couple cannot share a one-bedroom apartment with a juvenile. So if it's a bed baby, the crib's over in the corner, and the lesbian couple wants to share the bed, HUD, it's against the law, is the way it's been explained to me. And so that's the kind of strings that we have to avoid.
Well,
And I'm happy
there's
to report that we are now officially a 501c3. That happened, well, we thought it happened last month, but it actually happened in September. We just got the notice, the letter in October. So we can now actively go ahead after grants. And I'm not putting Brian on the spot here. I asked the mayor's office to send a representative. We would never take their money with strings attached, but we're doing good at what we do. We at least want to be at the table when they start to talk about our youth. Plain and simple.
A couple of other programs that we would like to implement in the coming year. We've had such a success, and I have to give a shout out here to Ursula, Sister Ursula. We've had such an amazing success with the 2 thrift sales that she's put on, that we're now very interested in the possibility of opening a thrift store as a continuing source of funding. Paul has seen this model work for other agencies in other cities. So as we're looking for a space for a drop-in center, we're also keeping another eye on a space where we could maybe combine that with a thrift store or a storefront of some sort. So that's something that we're looking at as well. And then transportation. We touched on it, we spend a lot of money on MARTA for the kids, to get the kids around town to different events or to take them places, whether it's taking community advanced practice nurses, picking them up from Covenant House, taking them to stand up for whatever it is. We'd very much like to have our own van. So we're looking at a way that we can finance and get the insurance coverage for a van. By the way, we are fully insured. I don't know if we've mentioned that at all tonight.
Okay, we're at 8:08, and I want everybody out here by 8:30 so that we can get over to the candlelight vigil if you so choose. So I'm going to switch 8 and make it last. So what questions do y'all have? We'll be honest with you. If you have a question, I think, Spec, can you have one?
Alan, why don't you go ahead and address that question about what are we doing with that case management?
When you come in as a client and we let you fill out your form, having done adult psychiatric evaluations in the past, I'd be filling it out and asking you all questions. By giving you the form, it's a whole lot less pressure. And then I go over the form, sometimes sitting on the rocking chair in the front with you. So we're just socially hanging out and talking. And if I can identify, like, for example, the sexual abuse situation or any other red flags that are causing problems and stuff, I'll ask, are you interested in seeing a counselor while you're here? Are you interested in taking care of some of these issues and stuff? And oftentimes, or through other conversations in the house, oftentimes at dinner. It's very important for me that we have family dinners because you learn so much about the kids. So that's where we were able to find 2 volunteers who were willing to come to the table and loan us their services and have a direct impact in our clients as well.
So that's a one-on-one counselor and also a group counselor that he's speaking of, who are a professional psychologists.
As far as the day-to-day case management goes, Alan graciously is doing all of that for us. He's living in the house, doing all the notes, keeping all the records. He's the case manager that's managing all of the kids on a day-to-day basis.
And we have a tracking system, set up a database basically where we can input those progress reports and share them across to all of the other board members and all the volunteers that work with the youth so that they have an idea of what's been going on, what's been happening, what the status is, if they found a job, if they need help looking for a job, etc. So
we can all log into it from our phones. We can log into the house and see whenever the kids come into the house, they have to punch in a 4-digit code. It logs who came in and it pops on a camera just so we can check on the safety of the kids.
It's also just to note, again, because it just hasn't been mentioned, as I've said, we're very dependent on our volunteers. All of our volunteers are checked. They go through a background check and they go through a training program. So before any one of our volunteers is even introduced to where the house is located at or meets one of our youth, we vetted them to know that, you know, this is somebody that we feel comfortable introducing into our program as a volunteer.
And let me piggyback on that before we, and I'm coming to you next. A lot of times, you know, people want to donate stuff and they go, well, we have a problem donating Lost and Found because we don't know where it's at. If you look, our corporate address is the Hippie Church around the corner where I work. We don't want people to know where the Lost and Found house is. It's for the safety of the youth. So if you've gotten to a volunteer point and you're approved, yes, we might meet you at the house and take in clothes or food or things like that. So that particularly came up while I was on the street. So I wanted to make sure that all our volunteers and anybody that has interest tonight knew that, so that question doesn't come up.
I'd like to add one more thing too. Did we say that 100 people, we've had approximately 100 people come through the house itself this year? Okay, I thought I knew.
Thank you.
Several questions, I guess, all in one. Are you going to build your board of directors? I noticed on your website you have a steering committee. What role do they play? And what role then are the consumers playing in helping to shape the organization itself?
Okay. We are in the process of building a larger board because you're basically looking at the staff right here, okay? The steering committee, it is a committee of our volunteers that helps us with events, helps us with the Big Gig Game Show.
Data entry.
I'm sorry?
As a data entry.
Yes.
Any sort of request for that.
Sometimes it's coming over and helping with the resume.
But we're looking at essentially revamping our board probably in the next month or two to expand to have more board positions as well, separate from the executive board, and which I think is a more traditional format for most nonprofits.
And bear with us, because that's going to be some growing pains for us. It really will. We don't necessarily know what it's going to look like at the end of next year, but the mission is going to be the same, is to serve our kids, our youth.
They come first. As far as the consumer, at this point, we're still dependent on you helping us to serve the kids. And, I mean, let's be honest, that's our community. Whenever we're asked to do something, we damn well step up and do it. We will always be as transparent as you need us to be. If you wanted a financial report right now, Cliff would email it to you. We hide nothing. If you wanted to see records, as long as you packed a background check.
His name's Klein, and that was
I'm sorry, Klein. I've had 3 hours sleep, and I got 24 more hours to go. It's cold outside. Like I said, and I've talked. I have one of my mentors is in the room right now. I won't call them out, but I've talked to them about how important it is to me and our board. Our community's been lied to for too long, you know, by different agencies. We want to make sure that we are serving our youth to the best of our abilities. We're not always successful. We've got a lot of damaged youth out there, but we're always going to err on the side of caution with them.
As far as, you know, keeping ourselves honest with the community, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this meeting 1 year after we started, was to come out in front of everybody and give you exactly this chance to ask us whatever sort of questions you want, and to let you know that you need to keep us honest, and we want to be able to be reportable to you. Because ultimately, as much as our clients are our stakeholders, the community is a huge stakeholder in the success of this organization. I'll add one more thing about restructuring the board. Not just because it's what nonprofits do, but because we need to have a viable group of people that we are going to transfer into greater leadership roles. And the only way to do that, I think, is to expand the number of people on the board and give them some responsibility and allow them to sort of move up and take over for any of us who might leave or want to leave or need to leave or move on. So.
But we're not looking for just figureheads. These people need to work.
That's the great thing. That's the great thing about my board. I can call them in the middle of the night and they come right. And the volunteers, most of them are the same way. We send out an email at night and we get answers the next day. Yes.
All right. One other question is, do you service youth who are not currently living in the house? Do you take care of them? Like,
yes.
And how do you manage those? Like keeping track of all those?
Same way.
Do you do all that, or that's done separately?
That's done. We hadn't touched it, and I don't know exactly how we missed this piece. But just to quickly tell you, we operate a 24/7, 365 hotline, okay? The number on these cards, a kid can pick this up and call or text this phone number anytime, day or night. Happily, I'm an early bird, so I'm usually up early in the morning. Rick's a night owl, so he usually covers it at night. And then we've got other volunteers that cover the hotline. This is the entry point for most of our kids. And yes, when we have a wait list, and right now we do have a wait list, we will serve those kids on the street. So that is done. The record keeping we do for the kids we serve on the street, because our goal is hopefully to eventually bring them into the house, get a full intake, introduce them into the whole case management process. The record keeping for the kids on the street is not today as thorough as we might like it to be. Essentially that's phone interview based things or text interview based things. So I know basic, age, where are you at, why are you homeless, things like that. But we don't have the minutia that we get when we do a real intake form. Part of that is because we haven't done it. Another reason for that is simply because it's very difficult to do with kids on the street. To do a full intake with kids on the street is extremely difficult because they're living under duress, stress, they're freaked out, they don't know where their next meal is coming from or where their next bed is going to be at. So it's very difficult to get into the minutia of, why are you homeless? Do you need to see a counselor or something like that? And even then, how would we handle that? That's another reason why a drop-in center would be something we would really very much like to open up so that we could service those kids on the street better. Did that answer your question?
And honestly, that's part of our outreach. I have taken ropes and tarps to kids living under I-20 at 3:30 in the morning because they called and it was raining and they were hungry.
Shh, there's a police officer in the room.
I got his number.
Just tonight, on my way to this meeting, we have a kid who's on our wait list who is literally living on the street right now. 23 years old, too old to fit into like Covenant House or Josh's shelter. It's getting ready to freeze tonight. Josh. So that's a kid that I would very much like to bring into the house. We don't have the bed space right now, so my advice to the kid is, you let me know what you need. If you get cold tonight, you let us know. Rick will run a blanket out to you, a tent out to you, or thank God you have some time left on your MARTA card, hop on the train, go to the airport tonight because it's warm at the airport.
Are you hungry? Here's something to get you through the night. Here's some water. Here's some canned food. Here's some snacks. Here's a list of places you can go tomorrow and get a meal. That's important because
These are not the answers we like to give.
no, it breaks my heart every time. But the problem out there is so tremendous. Nobody realizes it. You're not going to see one of our kids looking like your typical homeless person unless they're passed out on the street from exhaustion. They're going to do the best they can do to dress, to assimilate into society so that they don't stand out. Whether you as a fairy can identify that with that, and I as a sister, these kids need to be loved, they need to fit in, and there's trust issues. So anything we can do to take that stress away from them, we'll do it. So,
Yeah. Atlanta's blessed to have the National Creating Change Convention here in January, and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force always has a whole section on these kind of things. So I see you already nodding, so you're already aware.
Art's on top of
so
it.
They will be, you'll have people representing shelters and programs like this in every city. Hopefully, we'll get them all down here.
Yeah.
But I've been to Creating Change like 9 times, and it's such a powerful event. And it's a great way to resource the network.
So we've submitted a proposal to National Gay and Lesbian Task Force to do a 60-minute caucus on our program so that we can try to get other cities to duplicate our model. I literally today was calling Jessie Morgan to try to find out when we'll hear back if we've been approved.
She's in my cell phone.
Let me know. I'm waiting on pins and needles.
A suggestion, you talked about Kroger card. What's the discount they give us on, what is it, Wednesdays for being over 65?
Seniors. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yes,
like 5% or whatever. My point was going to be that you could probably get a group of people from Sage or from Prime Time to go do your shopping for you and get you to get 5% discount.
Alan's probably old.
We're going to be in need of another outreach person. This one's going to disappear into my basement.
I, of course, made the assumption that he isn't old enough. And beyond that he's not going to be old enough for a while.
I'm getting older running all these kids around. That would be a wonderful thing because now it's saving us money. I hate grocery shopping and having to do all this stuff with kids 24/7. You know, it's one more thing off my plate.
It gets another organization involved as well.
And we need all the organizations we need. There's a number of them out there we still are on our idea to reach out to. We invite organizations over approximately once a month. We stop a little bit during the summer so that they can kind of get to know us, we can get to know them, and they can see the stories hands-on.
And it's really fun to watch.
People in this room who have been to those luncheons.
Sisters have been
who has
over.
affected them.
The Leathermen have been over.
Bears have been
And
over.
the Leathermen are always, and the sisters are always apprehensive about that first meeting, and the kids just as much. But you throw food down in front of any gay person, and they're gonna sit there, and before you know it, there's a strong friendship.
But like you said, they're really incredible kids.
Yeah, they are. They really are.
You talked about goals for growth, and you talked about how much you were able to raise this year. With these goals for growth, like the drop-in center and things like that, how much more money do you need?
Honestly, we need to have a business plan set up for those thrift store and for that drop-in center.
Right.
We have had somebody approach us at one of our last volunteer meetings that had some experience with business plans to work on that. So I wish I could give you a number, but we're not there yet.
I gotta say, one thing on top of that is, when we came up with what we were interested in doing for the next year, one thing that was clear to all of us was we can't do it without volunteer buy-in and we can't do it without community buy-in. And one of the ways that these is going to be managed, and this also ties into restructuring the board, is that some of our volunteers are going to be stepping up to the plate to look at these programs and organize it and be part of writing those business plans. And it's very clear to us that we are being run ragged, being 5 people, even with the help we have from our volunteers. And the idea of us running a thrift store and this program and a drop-in shelter to us is, as we currently stand, is just too much work.
Even if a pile of money magically fell on us tonight, we would still have to worry about exactly how, with an all volunteer-driven organization, are we going to have doors open from 9 to 5 at a drop-in center? What volunteers are going to be able to man that? Things like that. So there's all sorts of staff. There's all sorts of logistical concerns.
And when I say volunteer buy-in, I mean the volunteers who are organizing this are going to have to be the ones to say, look, this is what we're willing to do. And that's as far as it can go, at least when it starts.
Blue shirt in the back.
Yes, I just had more of a comment than a question that might kind of help you. I'm actually a VISTA volunteer through AmeriCorps with the National Coalition for the Homeless, which, as you know, is not actually an organization as much as it is affiliate groups that are with them. They actually have a program, I know they have about 60 to 70 volunteers nationally, where they're putting people in communities like myself where we're going to be working full-time, and it's like to do outreach, PR, development. Maybe that's a possibility, then you would have at least someone there full-time that is getting someone, because it's in the form of a grant. It's actually a stipend the person gets. And then they
Sure. Okay, great. Any other questions? Pam?
Yeah, I just had a thought. One of the other youth organizations that I used to work with several years ago was really good at giving stuff, giving the kids stuff, soliciting help from the community, but they didn't really tap into the resources that they had in the kids that they were supposed to be helping. If you got a percentage of your people that you're helping that have high school diplomas, college degrees, instead of them essentially aging out, why not recruit them as volunteers? And I'll bet they have some of the skills that you need through their education to develop some of these programs. And they would give you the best input.
That's some of the stuff that we're definitely working with. And Kay, one of our success stories, has been giving us some great feedback.
Yeah.
So we're doing that on a limited basis. We've tried bringing in one of our kids that had graduated out to actually babysit the house and give Alan a break. That wasn't successful, seeing a peer now as a leader kind of situation. So we're growing and trying to figure out what's right and what's not right.
I'm sure there's some resources within those kids.
One of the thoughts that we've had too is moving them through a thrift store and letting them work at the thrift store that we're managing. Might be help them develop job skills as well as earn some income that the thrift store is bringing in. So yeah, we're definitely exposed and willing to try and figure that out and make it work.
One thing we are keeping in mind though is that there's going to be a lag period, of course, before they can come back, because they're going to know everybody in the house.
As well, you know, but I'm sure there's something.
Yeah.
So that they feel that they have some ownership.
I would love to have Lost and Found feel like an alma mater to them, to sort of feel like some, an organization that they can come back to and be invested in on the other side of it.
That said, we also have to be very careful with our kids because they're very sensitive to being outed, as it were, in the community as being homeless. So we have to be very careful about how our kids are exposed to the community and if they want to be exposed.
You are, of course, doing some things that overlap with Chris Kids. What is your relation to Chris Kids? Any relation?
Unfortunately, Chris Kids is the reason why I had to start up, because they're one of the ones that turned us away when I had the first homeless kid I was trying to work with.
Chris Kids does wonderful work with what they do. Chris Kids is focused more on foster kids, and Chris Kids does not deal with homeless kids. Chris Kids has gotten better in the past year. They do return a phone call within 72 hours to put a kid on the wait list. And I'm not angry about this. I'm telling you the truth, and I'll give you the numbers to call if you don't believe me. They will return your call within 72 hours to put a kid on a wait list for 6 months. Our kids do not have 72 hours, much less 6 months.
Again, national standards show that if we don't provide them with services within the first 48 hours, hence the name 48-hour vigil that he's going through this weekend, then they start doing survival sex.
Or drugs.
Survival criminal behavior. To do whatever they got to do to cope with the current situation.
Chris Kids does have a sort of drop-in shelter, but the requirements to be a part of that, at least from what I read on their website, you have to have, I believe, a DSM-IV diagnosis, or have, there's a list of things, of qualifications that could qualify you into that, but simply being homeless and young is not enough.
So what you're saying basically is that Chris Kids pretty much is an organization that's designed to work with kids who are coming out of another program somehow.
Foster care in particular.
They would have the time to plan.
Yes.
I'm going to be out at this particular time. Can you take me in?
We're not experts on Chris Kids. It'd really be better to let y'all hear from them.
Right.
But what we have discovered is that they're not the best organization to deal with the emergency situation of a kid on the street.
I'm homeless right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Structured grants. We have reached out trying to like what I identified as someone who really did have the mental health background that they are looking for, and we tried to make the referral. I knew that the young lady had spoken to Chris Kids before, but at the very end of us trying to get over there and have a meeting and knowing there still was going to be a waiting list, she actually blew up. She said, "I've already tried 3 or 4 times. There's no point in doing this." And that's not necessarily good for them because, once again, they have a house full and their people rotate out like folks rotate out.
But they're also a longer term program, so their turnover is going to be a lot slower.
Right.
So
there's definitely, our goals are completely different, and hopefully will complement as we continue to grow to some measure.
We can coexist.
So we're coming up on 8:30. Did you
Yes.
want to-
Yep. 8:31. Any
One
other
more
questions? Okay, then this is my time. I'll make it very short and sweet. We have a problem in this community, but we have the resources and the compassionate and the love to take care of it. Plain and simple. I'll keep taking those phone calls. I'll keep holding them and letting them cry because their parents have kicked them out. I'll keep with these guys taking them to the hospital when they fall. But we need your help. We'll take an hour a week. We'll take $10, whatever you've got, your spare change. Trust me, we'll make it work. We know what needs to be done out there. I could open 3 houses right now, especially with the winter coming on, and we could have it full. But the big thing we need from y'all is to talk to your friends. How many lesbians do I have in this room right now? Raise your hand. How many gay males do I have? How many straight people do I have or other? Okay? We love our straights. Sue makes the most wicked jello shots you've ever seen. And I've talked to y'all. We shared tears last night, you two. I need the whole community's support because we are taking care of the whole community when it comes to these kids. We don't care if they're gay. We don't care if they're bi. We don't care if they're trans. We're still trying to wrap our heads around it. We're still trying to figure out the best thing to do because nobody has the answer to that. Okay? We're going to do whatever it takes, and we'll keep meeting every year until we've got it down pat. I have promised my partner and promised my board I will work on this hand over fist for 5 years until we get it right. And then I'm moving on to stage because I get just as many calls for our other queer members, lesbians and gays that are homeless for whatever reason. Our biggest resource is you. Yes, your money's great, and I'll take it every time, but talk about us. Explain us to people. Come through the training. If you can't make a Saturday training and there's a group of you, I'll do one at 8 o'clock at night if you need it. Whatever it takes, we're going to get this job done. So I thank you for your time. Let's break up, and if you can, come on over to the Candlelight Vigil.
As treasurer, there's some buckets hanging around here.
And some forms over here.
There's forms that you'll see on the tables up here as well as in the back that you can fill out for donations and stuff like that as well. 9 o'clock, we hope to see you over at Brush Strokes. So we're going to do a candlelight vigil around the truck there. If you've got candles, please bring them. I've only got 40.
She's one of them kids.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.